What's up, my Yu-Gi Bros? I'm your host, the one, the only, the RJB0. Welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! In Business Casual. I was gone for a week because I was at a family camp where I had limited time and limited access to the internet and did not actually make any videos, so I went on a little bit of a hiatus, but I am back with a vengeance. Now, almost exactly a year ago, I made a video called The Top 5 Myths about Advantage and Plussing, and I will attempt to link that video in the description below. But the basic two takeaways from that video are A, card advantage doesn't mean everything. A player can have card advantage and lose, or not have card advantage and win. And the second takeaway from that is that there is no such thing as being in the lead in a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because there are so many possible loose factors that even if you have card advantage, even if you have life point advantage, you could still lose the game, which means that there are perfectly good players out there who find themselves losing because they get complacent with card advantage. So I think that it's a service for me to talk about the multitude of times in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! When card advantage is essentially meaningless, and you have to be really careful in these times because you can lose at the drop of a hat, and you really have to because anyway, you can lose unexpectedly because you were not prepared to have an out for one of these loose factors. So the first time of 6 in which advantage is essentially meaningless, in terms of card advantage at least, is when you are under 1,000 life points. Even under 2,000 life points in this game, if your opponent is playing Heartland Draco, that's still a precarious position, but particularly under 1,000 life points, because in this day and age, no matter how much card advantage you have, there are so many ways of losing 1,000 life points, or fewer than that even, in this game. If you have 1,000 life points, you can get Black Ship of Corn. You can get attacked by a random monster out of nowhere, and especially in a format like this one where people can commit to the field so little, if you lose your one monster, it is super easy to take out those last 1,000 life points. Even if you have monsters, you can get hit with Heartland Draco, Cowboy, Black Ship of Corn, all sorts of things. If you're at like 200 life points, all it takes is for your opponent's Trap Tricks Mermelio to run over your Ice Hand, and you lose the game. So no matter how much card advantage you have, it's important to you because you have to defend your position, but it isn't really important to your opponent how much they are behind in terms of card advantage, because it's so easy to take out those last few hundred life points. So you have to be really on guard when you are under those 1,000 life points, even if you have like 4 cards advantage over your opponent. So the next time when advantage in terms of card advantage is very minimally meaningful is when you are in a slow format and one player is starting to go for an OTK. The reason why I specify in a slow format is because in slow formats we tend to drop hand traps. And if we do not have hand traps, then OTKs are often very difficult to stop, because usually the only thing that we have to defend ourselves are defensive back row, which tend to be traps, which in this day and age are very easy to stop for an OTK deck via like Trap Stun or Wiretap or some such thing. So if your opponent is going for an OTK, it doesn't matter if you have way more cards on the field or in your hand than your opponent. If they have that OTK ready to go, then they win the game, and it doesn't matter how many cards advantage that you get. So that's another time when card advantage is essentially meaningless. Another time when card advantage is almost meaningless is when you draw dead. You could have a ton of cards in your hand or on the field, and if you can't make plays, then it doesn't mean anything for you. You can still lose the game. There's a reason why we don't play Thunder Dragon in every deck, even though it's a plus. It's because it doesn't do anything. And if you have a handful of cards that you can't use, then the only way that extra cards over your opponent could help you is if you have more opportunities through those cards to get one of the cards you need to start making plays. For instance, if you have a Pot of Duality among your total brick hand, then you may have a chance of pulling out the cards that you need to start making combos. But other than that, unless you have draw cards or search cards or something like that, a totally dead hand can have tons more cards than your opponent and still be losing. A similar situation, in which advantage is basically meaningless, is when your opponent has a Floodgate card on the board. If your opponent has a Floodgate card on the board, then you're essentially drawing dead every time you draw one of your combo pieces. Once again, the only way that that advantage will help you is if those extra cards you have over your opponent give you an opportunity to draw into an out for that Floodgate card. Otherwise, you can't make any plays, making your advantage entirely meaningless and giving your opponent a really good chance to set up and win the game. Another time when advantage is almost entirely meaningless is when you're in a simplified game state. Now, this sounds super weird, because there isn't really a whole lot to it. When there's a simplified game state, it's basically just playing the game like normal, except with fewer cards. But there are a ton of decks out there that flounder like heck in a simplified game state. For instance, Mermails, any really combo-based decks in a simplified game state will lose to a less combo-based deck in that simplified game state, even if they have like 2 cards advantage. A Mermail player could have like 5 cards in their hand to a Fire Fist player's like 3 cards in their hand, and the Fire Fist player can still win because it takes very little for a Fire Fist deck to work, but a Mermail player really needs those extra cards in order to win. So you can have advantage in a simplified game state and still lose the game very, very easily. And the final time when card advantage means basically nothing is when you are in the grind game. Because this, to a degree, this has a lot to do with drawing dead, because you have a lot more chances to draw dead if you've depleted all of your main strategies. But it also means that single cards that you draw, single top decks, can make a huge difference. A single soul charge in the grind game makes way more of a difference than an early game soul charge does. Or a mirror force that's really well timed. Or a top decked fire or ice hand could be huge in the grind game. And so no matter how many cards advantage you have, if you're in the grind game and you have run out of your main strategies, your opponent can win with just the most random of stuff. So these are all times when you have to be super on guard, even if you have a ton of cards advantage and you think that you're winning the game, because you are never winning the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Until your opponent is scooping up their cards. There are just so many unknown factors in a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That unless you've won, you aren't winning. And these times are just really good examples of why you need to pay attention to that. So I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know why in the comment section below. And of course, subscribe for more deck discussion, analysis, and general Yu-Gi-Oh! Shenanigans. Meanwhile, thank you guys for watching. I'm your host, the RJB0, and I got a jet. See you guys.